Welcome to Lesson 4 in this machine learning teaching series. In this lesson, we'll have a look at the Titanic disaster and how to predict survivors using a dataset. We'll also look at the Kaggle site for some awesome datasets. So what is Kaggle? Now, if you're serious about data science and machine learning, Kaggle is a must. So do check it out and Google it. Kaggle has millions of datasets and competitions that will allow you to learn, and competitions where you can compete with your skills and even earn money, a good sum of money in some cases. Kaggle is known as the world's largest data science community, and it has powerful tools, resources as well, videos and tutorials that can help you achieve any data science goals. It's sometimes called the Airbnb for data scientists. It's where they spend their nights and their weekends, allegedly, and it attracts data scientists from all over the world. It has over 500,000 active members from 194 countries, and it receives close to something like 150,000 plus submissions a month. Now, for beginners, competitions like the Titanic survival prediction or predicting house prices are really good to get the hang of this. And of course, you don't get paid for these particular competitions, which are closed, but they're a good learning experience. You can then, when you're confident, go for other competitions. There are tutorial kernels available, and that would be found in the kernels section, and they can be very helpful. So you could go onto Kaggle and you can find data sets on everything from the number of people who died of Ebola in a certain country to a list of Netflix movies or even COVID-19 world vaccination progress. As we mentioned, one of the suggestions for beginners is getting into data science using a simple example, and you can do this on Kaggle. And if you go into Kaggle, you'll see a Titanic list of survivors. But we're going to be using a different website. We're going to be doing it in a more student-friendly way. And when you feel more confident with this idea and you want to move to more advanced machine learning, as I've said, do check out Kaggle and you can get going with the professionals. In this lesson, we'll be using machinelearningforkids.co.uk, and you'll see when we go onto the site, which I'll take you through in a minute, you'll have these 3 steps. Train, where you collect examples of what you want the computer to recognize. You then learn and test. You actually use the examples to train the model, the computer, to recognize numbers. And then you use the machine learning model you've made to make a game or an app in Scratch or in Python. So let's get started. Let's look at this site called Machine Learning for Kids. It was started by a teacher who began using it to teach his students in local schools, and then it sort of emerged and it grew and it's used all over the world. It is completely free, and basically you teach a computer to play a game, and it gives you 3 steps here, which are the steps that you will be using. Now, I would recommend that you signed in, but you don't have to. You can just get started and try without registering. And if you have signed in, you'll see any machine learning projects that you have done in the past here. But if not, click on Add a New Project and give it a project name. So I'm going to say Titanic, and then you could decide what it was going to be recognizing. For instance, images, numbers, sounds, and there's a whole bunch of really, really fun different projects that you can choose from. So you click on Create, and you have your project there. Then you can train, you can learn and test, or you can make. So if you click on train, you'd add a bucket. Now this is for if you were creating something from scratch. Now at the moment, what we're going to be doing is making a project from a template. So instead of choosing something here, we're going to be going to Projects and Copy Template. So instead of Add a New Project, in this case, we're going to say Copy Template, and this gives you a template project which has already been set up for you. And this is a great way to look at how machine learning works in this context. So we're going to choose this Titanic survivor. You can see that there are other ones that you can play around with later, and you click on Import. It gives you some information about it, and it tells me that the user's maximum number of projects. So I'm just going to go back here and delete this one. and say copy template again and import. So it gives me this. It says Titanic survivors recognizing numbers. That's what the machine learning project is going to be, as either survived or did not survive. So we have two different buckets: did survive the Titanic or did not survive the Titanic. If I click on train, so it gives you these steps, it's very simple to follow. Immediately what it does for me, and we don't need to do this because it's done it for you, is it gives you two buckets, they call them, of the survived and the did not survive. And this is just data. So this particular person who was in class 3, the third class, had one sibling, was a female. They did not survive, sadly. However, these are the people which did survive. And you can add examples to your buckets. Once you've done that, and you're happy with that, and you've added your examples, you can go back to your project and you click Learn and Test. And what it does, you say Train New Machine Learning Model. It tells you what you've done and what's next. You've collected 288 examples of survived and 424 examples of did not survive. You then can put in some numbers here and see how it's recognized based on your training. So for instance, you've probably watched the movie where you have Jack Dawson, I think his name is, who was Leo DiCaprio, and he was in third class. He was a male. I think he was probably like 18 or 20 or something. He didn't have any siblings or parents, and he didn't pay anything. His ticket fare was 0, and he boarded from Southampton. So you click on test, and it says recognized as did not survive. Now remember, I've not actually put in someone's name. I've just given them a scenario. I've said, well, what if I put someone on the Titanic who fit this criteria? Would they live? And it says, well, probably in this case they would, with 100% confidence, have not survived. Now if you look at Kate Winslet and her character, she was in the first class. She was a female. Again, I don't know, I think she was 20 or something like that. I don't know if she had any siblings or parents, but possibly. And, she paid quite a lot for her ticket. I'm not entirely sure how much, but let's say 200. And you test it, and it says she definitely survived. So she was a first-class woman, and she paid a fare, and she survived. So this is how it works. And obviously you haven't coded this algorithm, but it shows you what's happening. So if the computer's getting too many things wrong, you might want to go back to the train page and collect some more examples. So if you're building your own model from scratch, you would build the buckets yourself and add examples, and then you'd have this information where you could play around with it. So even if you're making your own project, you can do this, and I would suggest, if you're doing that, of course, that you sign up. So here you are, and you've done that. You can then go back to your project and you can say make, and it allows you to make something with your machine learning model. So you could actually create something in Scratch or in Python. So for instance, if you clicked on Python, you can copy the code to run on your computer if you feel confident with that. There's a little bit of stuff that you do need to do. You need to change the API key. So when it gives you the code over here, there's a few things. It just tells you replace this with this. And if you see this test data thing, just replace it with this, which is going to be what you're generating from these drop-down menus. And once you've done that, you can basically run the program in Python and you can see it do exactly the same thing. So this machine learning for kids is basically a way of setting up a project using these 3 things: train, learn and test and make. And you can actually make your own examples, your own data sets of what you want the computer to recognize. And it's super, super exciting because you can then see what you've trained it to do, and you can use examples to spot patterns or train the computer to recognize something. There's plenty of other worksheets and ideas here, such as a virtual pet or a zombie escape, ink blots, secret code. This is a really great one that you can do in Python, not here, but there's another example where you can do it in Python as well. So really worth looking at some of these if you'd like to try basic examples and get the hang of how machine learning works. Earlier on in video 1 of this teaching series, we looked at an example which was something like this, where you have a student, you have a homework score, a classwork score, attendance, And then you have this result, which is, did they pass the exam? Now, students which do everything really, really well, ideally, or in your imagination, they would probably be likely to pass an exam. So this student did. His homework score was pretty low, and he didn't pass the exam, but his classwork was good and his attendance was good. And we go on to the next example. This student didn't have terribly good classwork or attendance, but clearly had done his homework or her homework and passed the exam. And then we had an anomaly here, where this student had a homework score of 90%, classwork score of 90%, attendance was amazing, but did not pass the exam. Now, this is just a small data set, but you can imagine sometimes you're dealing with millions and millions and millions of rows of data, and you would not be able to come to a conclusion about how or why particular students pass exams and don't, and a computer might be able to predict or spot patterns better than you. In this example, so if we go back, you could say add a new project. I could call it Students Pass, and what we're doing is we're recognizing numbers. Now you would have to convert or abstract the data that you have to make it something specific. So I would say something like, say, add a value. I could say attendance. That's going to be a number. We're also going to have homework, which is going to be a number, and add one more, classwork, just call it classwork, which is also going to be a number, and actually percentage, but let's just assume that's a number for now. So we create, we click on that, and we want to train. So I want to add some buckets now. So I'm going to say passed, which is great, and I want to add another one, which is failed. And I want to add some examples. So I know from my spreadsheet that I had one situation where the attendance was 100, the homework was 100, coursework was 100, and actually they passed. That's great. So in this one, attendance was 90, the homework was 100. So what next? You might want to have a look at the timeline of machine learning. There's a great Wikipedia page, and it goes through major discoveries, achievements, milestones, and major events. That's page 1 and that's page 2, and you can see where we are in the present day. And you might want to look into various documentaries or YouTube videos which talk about the progression of machine learning and AI. For instance, Google's AlphaGo program became the first computer Go program to beat an unhandicapped professional human player, using a combination of machine learning and tree search techniques. You may also want to look at some of the social, ethical, and environmental applications and impacts of AI and machine learning before you delve further into this subject.